Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast IDP edition. I'm Jon Macri, and as we reach this crucial part of the season, right around the midway point of the fantasy regular season, those start-sit decisions become all the more important, right? As we jockey our way into position to make the playoffs, and that's why we're once again going to dive into all the key information and rankings for our IDP relevant players heading into Week 7, so that you guys are fully ready to dominate the week. So let's get it. All right, Week 7. Hopefully, lucky number 7 that we don't get any more effing injuries to our top players. But at the very least, it's a week to feel fortunate because back to join me to break down this slate of games from DynastyNerds.com, my friend and fellow Jon, Mr. Jon Glosser. What's up, buddy?
Hey, buddy. Thanks for having me on. The Jon cast, of course, spelled correctly, is officially back.
Yes, sir. We are excited to do it again, man. And yeah, it's always fun. We always get to talk, kind of rookies in the off season and stuff, and kind of break down the incoming, rookie class. And now we get to kind of get into it in season and talk about how these players are kind of performing and who we trust, who we don't, all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, I'm always glad that we can get you on, and I appreciate you coming on here to do this.
Anytime, and I'm kind of glad because that DB episode that we do pre and post draft is one of my favorite times of year, and being Week 7, we actually are probably going to hit on and get to talk about a couple of these guys that we talked about, and so pretty excited about that.
Yeah, it worked out nicely. Like, Week 1, we might not necessarily have got a chance to talk about a lot of them, but like here in Week 7, there's quite a few of them that are starting. So this will be fun to kind of follow up on a lot of those names that we talked about in the offseason. But yeah, we're doing our usual thing here in Week 7. We're going game by game, breaking down all the key IDP information to get you guys ready for the week ahead. And again, if you don't want to listen to the entire thing, we will have the timestamps in the episode description, so that way you can jump around, find the games that you're looking for. I'll also have the IDP fantasy report in the episode description. IDP rankings article will be linked in there as well. And the other link actually that I'll include will be to our brand new IDP rankings page, where all the updates kind of leading into the week will be housed, and you could sort them by position. So edge, DT, defensive line, which will combine the edge and the defensive tackle rankings, linebacker, cornerback, safety, and then a DB section as well, which will combine the safeties and the cornerbacks, all of which you can access with a PFF Plus subscription. So make sure to check that out as well if you're looking for updates closer to game time. All right, with all that said, let's get right into the Week 7 slate, Glosser, and kick things off with Thursday Night Football between the Denver Broncos and the New Orleans Saints. Whoever you want to cover first in this.
We'll start with Denver. First of all, this injury report, I think I saw a tweet today. It said what did it say, New Orleans injury report's longer than a CVS receipt or something like that. So, but yeah, this game looks pretty ugly. Looks like Patrick Surtain is out as well. I think I saw it today. So, but starting off with Denver's D line there, had a Week 6, both Zach Allen and John Cooper. They're top 12 defensive line and fantasy points per game. Not a bad matchup for them. Brandon Jones from the safety position actually coming off a really, really big week. I tracked back to like 2022, I think was his previous high tackle. He had 11 in that game. And the Saints have allowed both Tyke Smith and Jordan Whitehead to have top 24 finishes last week. So outside of that, still a few of my leagues still reeling from the Alex Singleton injury. Hurtful. Still ranks as linebacker 7 in fantasy points per game. I don't think that's probably going to change seeing as how he's not going to play for the rest of the year. But Justin Strnad, I thought, has been pretty good. Linebacker
Yeah.
20 in fantasy points per game since the Singleton injury. Not quite the player that's, has a 20 tackle potential like Singleton did, but, serviceable. And for those owners who did lose him, it's not a bad consolation prize there.
Yeah, it's not bad at all, right? Like I like Sternad. Like I know he's not playing a full-time role, which it can be fine, given the matchup and stuff. Like this is a pretty good matchup for the linebacker position. Sternad, he only played around 76% of snaps last week. That'll probably be the norm for him. But again, not a bad matchup to get a higher snap share and potentially higher tackle numbers as well. But yeah, Cody Barton still seems to be kind of the 100% player that we could trust a little bit more consistently. But I did like what you said about Zach Allen and Jonathan Cooper as well. They've been really good. Like Zach Allen, been one of the most consistent and productive players at defensive tackle. He's DT1 for us,
Yep.
and playing like a very high 90% snap share on the year, which has put him on pace to surpass his career high in sacks already, which was 5.5. He's already just 2 shy of that with 3.5, and a decent matchup against the Saints offensive line, which will again, they'll be starting Spencer Rattler at quarterback as well. He took 5 sacks in his season debut last week, behind the 3rd worst interior offensive line in terms of pass blocking grade this week. So love Zach Allen. He's DT1 for me again this week. And then Jonathan Cooper too, like against Trevor Penning, who's been a poor pass blocker. Cooper's been top 5 at his position in scoring for us. So like all he does is produce. 4.5 sacks already, 25 total tackles, averaging 76% of snaps. Like he's not a killer in terms of pass rush metrics, but he's not bad either, right? 66.5 pass rush grade on the year, 12.8% win rate. He's fine. 24 total pressures. That's top 10 for the position. So Jonathan Cooper, I have him inside the top 10 this week. So we'll see if that works out. But I like him quite a bit just because of the production, the playing time, and the matchup. And then how about on the Saints side of things? Like you said, the injuries, they're piling up obviously for their wide receivers, but for their safeties as well, because Aaron Matthew left last game with an injury. Will Harris is already on IR, so possibly we get Jordan Howden and Jonathan Abram this week. Do you feel any kind of way about about starting either of those two guys if you need to?
Now, Abram's been good over these last couple, really small sample size, but DB11 and fantasy points per game, obviously with a 2-game sample size, doesn't really do a ton for us. But he's been a top 30 DB overall in those 2 games. So, obviously the interception has helped, but I don't feel super comfortable. I mean, if you're talking about the Saints and the secondary, I mean, obviously we're talking about Paulson Adebo and Alante Taylor. So those guys both top 5 right now in overall, amongst DBs. So it has been almost like a plug and play for those guys. They feel pretty matchup proof. Playing Denver, who is not the greatest offense around. I think if in terms of quantifying them as matchup proof, I think you will get your answer this week because one of the worst passing offenses in the league there. So we'll get to see that, but IDP managers who have been in on Adebo and Taylor this year have been rewarded big time.
Yeah, no, they've been amazing. Yeah, I guess like you said, like matchup as far as matchup goes, like I worry like just slightly for Taylor this week, but only because like Denver, they're more like around average as far as offensive 11 personnel, like where Taylor is more likely to come off the field in those situations where they're not running out 3 wide receivers. And like I still like I have him as CB17 this week, so it's not like I moved him way down the rankings or anything like that. It's just more just kind of tempering expectations, I guess. Like you said, for a lot of the same reasons, like the offense itself, but also the way that they deploy that offense and how it affects some of these nickel cornerbacks in the league and gets them off the field a little bit more. So we'll see how Taylor does. And like you said, it'll be a very good test to see if he is kind of that matchup proof type player against the Broncos. And then, I mean, other than that, for the Saints, like we know Pete Werner missed last game. Willie Gay was the LB2 there. It's not a great matchup for tackles allowed to the linebacker position. And they're not like full-time roles either for that LB2 spot. So I don't love anybody in this linebacker core for the Saints this week.
Yeah, it sounds like Warner's not going to play again,
Okay,
obviously, on
so
like a short week. Yeah, it's just, I think Anthony Orgy was one that like kind of had the, he was a buy,
yep.
free a week ago, and then played 73 snaps in week 5. And then he comes back and Willie Gay plays 53 snaps in week 6. So, typical Saints stuff.
Yep.
Really hard to trust there. Ironically enough, both Gay and Orgy in those weeks that they played most of the snaps finished as linebacker 20. So, I think if you pick the right one and you got a 50-50 shot there, you're going to get a top 24 starting linebacker potentially. But to your point, the matchup isn't good. So I'm
Yeah.
fading that pretty easily.
Yeah, Broncos giving up the 29th most tackles per game to the linebacker position. So I'm not like in a desperate spot to try to find one of those guys. We'll hopefully find somebody else to replace them. Um, but yeah, anything else from this game before we move on to the Sunday slate?
No, hope there's a good college game on or a good playoff baseball game. So,
Yeah.
so you don't have to watch.
Yeah, I'll be watching Red Wings Rangers, and then maybe I'll catch like the second half of this Thursday night football game.
It's how you know it's bad when regular season hockey, like 6 games in, is getting taken precedent.
Oh yeah, always. All right, let's take a quick ad break and then I'll get into the Sunday slate here. The best part of football season, checking out the post-game stats. Which wideouts scored more than 2 touchdowns? Which quarterbacks threw for less than 350 yards? Think you can pick who will do what before kickoff? Then play Pick Six from DraftKings, an official sports betting partner, our sports fantasy partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Pick Six app, select between 2 and 6 players, and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. It's that simple. And for the first time, Pick Six players, check this out. New customers play $5 on your first pick set. Get $50 in Pick Six credits. Download the new DraftKings Pick Six app now and use code PFF. That's code PFF for new customers to play $5 on your first pick set. Get $50 in Pick Six credits only on DraftKings Pick Six. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be by jurisdiction. Pick Six not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Non-withdrawable Pick Six credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. See terms at picksix.draftkings.com/promos. All right, let's go on to the game in the UK this week. It is the New England Patriots at the London Jaguars. And we'll start with the Patriots this time around. And I guess the player that I want to start with first is Keon White. So Keon White, I have his edge 14 right now. I know that he's been fairly quiet as far as production goes, especially in the sack column, but he does have a decent matchup here going against Anton Harrison at right tackle. That is kind of the weakness to attack here on this Jaguars offensive line. He should see quite a bit of him. Trevor Lawrence also among the higher pressure to sack conversion rates in the league for the quarterback position at 23.1%. That's the 12th highest rate. And White is still he's still playing a ton. 86.4 pass rush grade is still an excellent mark. I know he hasn't had a sack since week 2, so he's just outside the top 12 for me. Like if we've seen the production a little bit more consistently, I'd probably feel more comfortable with him, but I still kind of believe in him, his potential, and especially the matchup this week for Keon White. But how are you feeling about him? Because I know not everybody is kind of, I guess, as high on him right now.
Yeah, I'm high on him. I'm with you on that. Obviously, like the boom. I think it was like what four sacks or something in the first 2 games, or in a forced fumble, I think, in there. So he was. I think the my favorite thing about him, obviously, is for your defensive tackle premium leagues. I think on MFL he's still carrying the defensive tackle. Position tag. So that's really nice,
Mhm.
obviously. But the Jags allowing the 6th most sacks per game. I think that's big. I think this could be the week that he kind of finally gets back into that sack column. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head with all that. Like playing the high percentage of snaps, still like him a lot as a player. I think this is obviously a breakout season for him, and I expect that to kind of turn around a little bit here as New England hopefully starts a little new era here with Drake May.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping, right? Like I think just he continues to play so well. He's still playing a ton, so not like overly concerned about anything like that. So I think there's definitely some positive regression that he'll be due for here in the coming weeks, and hopefully it starts this week. other than that, like Marte Mapu, really interesting player, is going to be filling in for the criminal Jabril Peppers there. So I don't expect him back anytime soon. But it's not like, again, it's not the best matchup this week. I think the Jaguars given up the 27th most tackles to the safety position. So the nice thing about Mapu is that he played 48% in the box last week, which I mean, you love to see that. Duggar's still playing there as well. So I got him as like a low end safety too this week. I think safety 23 to be exact, just because I like the alignment more so than the matchup. But there'll be better weeks for him. And then as far as the New England linebackers go, like I hate this group. Jelani Tavai is probably going to be the highest ranked Patriots linebacker for me, and he's at like LB 48. He's not a full-time linebacker. He's coming off on passing downs as well now, ceding those snaps to Christian Ellis. So it's a kind of a mess there at the New England linebacker core, which is something that we've been used to in the past, and seems to be the case once again here with Juwan Bentley out.
Yeah, I literally wrote in my notes for New England linebackers, meh.
Yeah.
So no trust there. Raekwon McMillan obviously having a nice little resurgence there,
Sure.
kind of on some tackling volume, but of course in true New England style, we'll just cut his snaps because why can guys who love IDP have nice things?
Yeah.
So yeah, Tavai on the tackling volume alone, but coming off the field, I do have a little bit of a man crush on Marte Mapu. Like I think I mean 28 box snaps in both those last two starts since he's been coming back. I think the ability to have Christian Gonzalez be as good as he is, and obviously everyone's starting to take notice, gives New England a little bit more versatility with Mapu, which is I think what they want to do. And it sounds like Jabril Peppers' season is probably over. And then Duggar, I think, is dealing with that ankle still. So I think he may have been downgraded to questionable, but obviously it's still early in the week. So we'll see. But yeah, Mapu's kind of very interesting too, because he's one of those guys that you feel like on usage right now that he's given the safety tag, but you can kind of feel like his usage is a little more linebackery.
Yeah.
So obviously in IDP leagues, that's kind of our cheat code there, if you will. So I'll keep riding that wave because there's absolutely nothing that you can trust at the linebacker position right now. And hopefully, like you said, the matchup's not great, but depending on what the usage is, I think the one thing that I really liking about Mapu to see over these last two games is he's not playing a ton of deep. You know what I mean? He's not playing hardly any corner. I think it was like 6 snaps total in 2 weeks or something like that. So, and being able to get the sack last week and playing, I think 8 defensive lineman snaps, like those are encouraging things, like saying we want to use them all over. So obviously the more positions he's playing, the more opportunities he has for IDP scoring. That's big. So to take something good out of that, mess of a defense over there in New England. Another stat I read too to wrap up Bentley was I think like the rushing total is like went up like 70 or 80 yards since he's been hurt. The defense. So they clearly need to address linebacker because it's a mess.
Yeah. I it's hard to imagine getting any kind of like highly drafted linebacker or something like that in New England, because you kind of want it, but at the same time you don't, because you know that there will probably be some rotation shenanigans going on there for sure, right? So let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars next here. And Jacksonville, so a couple nice matchups here, at least for the edge rushers, right? Like Josh Hines Allen, I have his edge 5 this week. I know just 2.5 sacks on the year, 17.5 last year. So it could a little bit of a slow start for sure, right? But I think he has a chance to get back on track here this week against backup left tackle Zach Thomas, who was filling in for the injured Vidarian Lowe last week, and likely again this week, right? So Zach Thomas, that is, came out of last week's game having allowed 4 total pressures, including a sack. Meanwhile, rookie quarterback Drake May took 4 sacks himself and is allowing a pretty concerning 31.6% pressure to sack conversion rate on the year so far through his 2 appearances. But Hines Allen, like, He's been really good. He still owns top 15 pass rush metrics for the position. I think should be in a really nice spot for probably his best IDP performance of the season, I would imagine. So I feel pretty good about ranking him highly. And then even Trayvon Walker, I have his edge 23 this week. I know the pass rush metrics haven't been amazing this year outside of that 1-3 sack game. All of his pass rush grades are below or 62 and below. So like nothing amazing from him, but he gets Demontre Jacobs, who owns the worst pass blocking grade in the league right now. So I like Trayvon Walker quite a bit as a streamer, at least this week.
Yeah, those two have just been too inconsistent this year. I think a lot
Yeah.
of that has been, I know Walker had that real big boom week, but a lot of it has been how poor the Jaguars have performed
Yeah.
overall. You know, when you have two pass rushers like that, you would ideally like to be up in a game, which the Jaguars never are. So that's hurting quite a bit. But yeah, this is, you know, on paper, this is the best matchup they're probably going to see all season. New England being one of 11 teams to surrender at least 90 tackles to a defensive line position this season. On top of that, the Jags linebackers, Ventrell Miller is one that I've been
Mm-hmm.
on. He's been solid, but it is really tough to trust because if you could combine, I know we hear this all the time, but if you can combine him and Chad Muma from like a skill set standpoint, you might actually have a linebacker, but they both have their strengths and have their
Yeah.
weaknesses. Seems like with Devin Lloyd back, obviously he's going to dominate those snaps while Olakun is out. But Miller seems to be the high volume tackler more that you can trust. And, you know, I know they've been flopping back and forth. Miller I have as linebacker 31 in total fantasy points and linebacker 47 in fantasy points per game.
Mm-hmm.
Not too bad considering he had 5 total points, which I think were all on special teams over the first couple games before Olakun got hurt. So
Yeah.
he's a guy that, you know, if you're in a bind, you know, don't go the Saints linebacker route, maybe go this route. So he's been solid, and I've added him on quite a few deep teams that have been hurting that linebacker. So
Yeah.
him and Balen Spector for a little while there. I had to ride that wave while there's some injuries happening.
Yeah, it gets nasty in season, right? I was with you. I mean, I got the Balen Spector Troy Reader combo in a couple leagues. Just it's terrible, man. But yeah, Vedro Miller, like he played 70% of snaps last week, which was nice. Definitely more than Chad Muma. He's definitely been efficient. So don't mind him like in deeper leagues. Like I don't think there's any concern about him, you know, kind of remaining a starter with Foye back and Devin Lloyd also healthy, right? Like he's hasn't been great as far as like his grades go. 40.6
Yeah,
coverage grade, ranks 79th among 89 linebackers. So there's definitely, like you said, there's weaknesses to his
yeah.
game that hopefully, you know, he'll grow into. But yeah, other than that, anything else from Jacksonville, New England?
No.
No. Let's go to Tennessee and Buffalo next. Then, where do you want to start with these two teams, John?
Tennessee, we'll go with Tennessee there. Murray, linebacker 17, and Ernest Jones. I think outside of week 1, those guys have been in double digit fantasy points in every game. I have the Bills allowing 6 top 24 linebacker performances this season. So as much as it's probably not on paper the greatest matchup, I do think that those guys are going to continue to produce. That Tennessee defense is extremely good from a stat perspective. I'm sure they're wishing they had any bit of resemblance of offense, but yeah, Murray and Jones have been solid, and I think like the guys you want to target, and you're probably kind of considering matchup proof from an IDP perspective every week. So
Yeah.
on the DB side, I think I don't have many notes on this game, but Teron Johnson is another guy, obviously coming back this week for Buffalo, 8 tackles and an interception, and kind of put the death to Cam Lewis, who was another bye-week fill-in guy who ended up being like a top 40-ish DB in that little run that he had. So yeah, I mean, outside of that, there isn't a ton from this game. Obviously, on the Buffalo side, you got Terrell Bernard back, Dorian Williams having a breakout season. I think most people kind of know that. I think as this goes and dwindles on, Terrell Bernard had like insane numbers last year from an impact play perspective.
Yeah.
I think those are going to start, hitting into Dorian Williams, right? Because it's a lot easier to outplay Balin Spector than it is, a guy like Terrell Bernard. But
Sure.
Can't argue with where he's at right now. Top 5 in total points and top 10 in fantasy points per game. But with Bernard back, I think he's been top 36 and top 40 linebacker in 2 games, and I would say he's probably not fully back yet either. So.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of more meat left on the bone there with Terrell Bernard for IDP. Like I feel pretty good about him. I think I got him as LB5 this week. Like I think he could get back there this week. Titans giving up the 4th most tackles per game to the linebacker position. I like Dorian Williams as well too. Like you said, like hasn't been like the full-time guy, but he played his highest snap share of the season this past week at 95%. Only missed 3 defensive snaps. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see if that kind of continues or if that was just kind of game script dependent or whatever the case is going to be. But I like Dorian Williams a fair bit, especially in this kind of matchup. So I got him as LB21 this week. Yeah, like Teron Johnson as well. The Bills or the Titans playing a top 10 rate of 11 personnel. So that'll help Teron Johnson just kind of remain in the slot there and hopefully soak up some tackles. But then, yeah, Greg Rousseau is kind of the other interesting name. Another guy that's been fairly quiet since week 1, right? He hasn't had a sack since then, but has been playing pretty well. He's going to see a lot of the Titans' right tackle, who used to be Nicholas Petit-Frere, who we like to pick on, but they replaced him with Leroy Watson. Now, Leroy Watson has a 46.6 pass blocking grade in his debut. Nicholas Petit-Frere was not any better, 45.4. So it's like it continues to be a nice matchup at right tackle there for the Titans and our opposing pass rushers. Gregory Rousseau, 77.2 pass rush grade, hasn't had a sack since week 1, but he's going to line up on Watson quite a bit. And Will Levis has definitely shown a tendency to take some sacks here. So I like Gregory Rousseau as one of the top plays at edge this week. All right, let's go to Detroit and Minnesota next. Man, I have a note that just says F the injury Grim Reaper. It's just a sad face for our guy Aiden Hutchinson. Hopefully heals and gets healthy, but it sucks, man. It's such a brutal loss, and there's really no replacing him. Like I talked about it in the IDP recap episode. There's just nothing we could do at this point. He was one of the most irreplaceable players in IDP this season, so it sucks to see him done for the year. Other than that, though, I mean, the Lions linebackers, just Alex Anzalone just continues to be super inefficient, right? Like 10.9% tackle rate. The average is 13.2% for the position, right? Like he's not good. He's not even solid. Like he's below mid basically. And that's just kind of who he is, right? He's not changing. I don't know that anybody's going to be impressed by this guy for IDP purposes, but he's the 100% linebacker, right? So there's going to be weeks where he's fine and usable, where the rest of this linebacker group in Detroit is just kind of a mess. Like Jack Campbell, he's been the better player, at least for IDP purposes, but it's hard to trust him when his snap share is constantly fluctuating. So how are you feeling about this Detroit linebacker core? Any kind of hope or faith in like a Jack Campbell this week?
Definitely first and foremost, RIP to Hutchinson's
Yeah.
like insane season. I think I had him. I think Derrick Henry was the only skill position player I had averaging more fantasy points per game than him, which hurt a lot of my teams. But outside of trading for Myles Garrett, definitely not replaceable. So with you on that one. So yeah, the linebackers I've faded Anzalone for years and have been like completely wrong on that, and I'm like, it's finally like my victory lap time, I guess, if you will. But I'm not taking it. But Anzalone, linebacker 38, Campbell, linebacker 55 in fantasy points per game. There's just like a big thing with that too is the inefficiency of the play, the snap counts for Campbell, which like we all know the talent that this guy has. It's just like, I don't know if he doesn't fit the defense or we were drafting best player available at the time. I don't know what happened there, but hard to, dispute anything Detroit's doing with the amount of top 100 picks that they have just dominating right now, but especially on the offensive side. But the big thing with the linebackers is like there's no impact plays there. Like there's no interceptions, there's no sacks, there's no forced fumbles. Like that's gonna kill those guys when it comes to producing fantasy points. But inconsistent tackling volumes too for Campbell is the big thing, and I think I charted only one game over 75% snap share. Like that's just not,
Right.
that's not going to be good for IDP managers in terms of starting him. So I have no faith in that position at all. I think a big reason with the lack of impact plays is probably why Brian Branch is just like out of this world this year too.
Okay.
So we can't, of course, have both. So, but yeah, the linebacker position's a fade. I mean, you're not dropping any of these guys in dynasty or even in some of the Campbell probably in some of these redraft leagues. But
Right.
yeah, there's just when you're looking at it and crunching the numbers, it's like I'm much rather start a guy as inefficient of a tackler, a Ventra Miller type of guy over
Mhm.
somebody who's just is going to give you that less than 10 points per week and potentially lose a matchup for you. So.
Yep, I'm with you. It sucks, but that is basically kind of what we've had to do with these guys until it changes, which doesn't look like it's going to anytime soon. So let's go to the Minnesota side of things, and again, talked about the linebackers because Blake Cashman has turf toe. Doesn't seem like he's going to be playing this week, so Ivan Pace, we could fire him up, assuming that he's going to be that 100% snap player, replacing Blake Cashman in the defense as potentially the green dot. We'll see what happens there. But either way, like he's been the 100% player for Brian Flores in the past when we had injuries to Jordan
Yep.
Hicks last season, right? So there's at least precedent there that we could kind of fall back on and at least trust Ivan Pace a little bit more. I got him as a top 12 linebacker this week. I like the matchup against the Lions. We know what Ivan Pace can do on a smaller snap share. Hopefully, he can continue that on a larger snap share as well. So, feeling pretty good about him. Cam Grugier-Hill likely going to be the second linebacker there. I'm not really going to trust him. Like maybe he plays a little bit more than that, part-time snap share against a run-heavy Lions offense, but I don't think it's going to be enough to trust him. He's like LB 60 for me. So, really, it's just Ivan Pace and the safeties that I'm most interested in for the Minnesota Vikings, like Josh Metellus, safety 8 for me. I think he's going to play a lot in the box this week. Harrison Smith, safety 22, Cam Bynum, safety 24. Like all three of these guys are kind of taking turns each week, it seems, coming off the field for a bit for whatever reason, but they're all getting some pretty good usage and alignments and production there as well. So still continuing to trust those guys. But yeah, other than that, I mean, a tougher matchup for Jonathan Greenard and Andrew Van Ginkel going against this Lions offensive line and Jared Goff, who's done a decent job at avoiding sacks. Like Greenard, I got him as edge 19, Van Ginkel edge 15. Like they've been productive, right? They're not bad. It's more about the matchup this week against that Lions offensive line. How are you feeling about Minnesota?
You gotta love Brian Flores. He's gonna give you one linebacker and he's gonna give you three solid
Yeah,
defensive backs. It's just what he does. I as an IDP manager, I truly appreciate it. So yeah, I kind of read the same thing. Sounds like Cashman's out. So Ivan Pace, I like Ivan Pace this week. I think I agree with that top 12 there. Linebacker 21 in fantasy points per game. In terms of the safeties, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. All of them are averaging over 10 fantasy points per game. I think Harrison Smith is the only one who scored at least 10 points in every single game. And
Mhm.
he still seems to be, Harrison Smith,
Yeah.
not ever going to go away. And I have Detroit allowing 3 top 12 finishes this season at the safety position, as well as 5 top 24 finishes. So good matchup for the safeties. I think they'll be good. The Minnesota D line versus Detroit O line, 5th fewest sacks per game allowed for Detroit, 3rd most sacks for Minnesota. That is going to be, as a true football fan, guy who loves the trench, battles, that's going to be a good one to watch. Brian Flores has seemed to be a step ahead of every single quarterback that he's played this year.
Sure.
So that is going to be a really good one. That Detroit O-line is regarded as one of the best in the league for a reason. So that is going to be a very interesting matchup to see how that one goes and to see if Minnesota could kind of keep that hot streak going. That defense is kind of making you question things when you have on the offensive side, when you have some fantasy matchups going up against them. So but yeah, I'm with you. I expect Bynum, Harrison Smith, and Josh Metellus to do what they do. They're going to come in there and produce, and Ivan Pace obviously getting a big boost this week. So
Yeah, gonna be excited to see Ivan Pace hopefully play that full-time role. But let's go from one really good offensive line in Detroit to one putrid offensive line in Cleveland. Cincinnati Bengals at the Cleveland Browns. Jon, where do you want to start with these two teams?
Well, you got to tell me that Trey Hendrickson is your DL1 this week.
Oh man, yeah.
So, not having his greatest season, but not a bad season, obviously. But the Browns allowing 5.2 sacks per game, 7 sacks allowed per game at home, which is insane. Like
Yeah.
you'd like to read that, you feel like it's made up, but but nevertheless, um, for the Cincinnati safeties, like it's just like why. Bad matchup for the Browns, second fewest tackles allowed to the position. And, the Browns are just one of 3 teams that are averaging less than 150 pass yards per game. Going to be really hard to get production out of a safety position when the other team doesn't pass the ball. Everybody can't play in the box, unfortunately. And then, Cam Taylor-Britt has been, solid this year. I have DB 79 overall, cornerback 28, nothing special, but in those cornerback premium leagues, like he's had some really high moments, some really low moments, but overall as a player, he's an exciting guy to watch. But watching Browns games at this point is not fun on either side of the ball. And, got some guys on the Browns defense I do really enjoy watching them play football, but it's become tough.
Yeah, no, the Browns offense is a disaster, and now without Amari Cooper, I mean, I don't know what it's going to look like. Like, yeah, it's nice they get Nick Chubb back this week, but Trey Hendrickson is going to kill that offensive line. I'm with you, and the one note, like, just on the Cincinnati safeties, I don't know if this is going to be a trend or not, but it is an interesting thing that I've kind of noticed is that Von Bell is like slowly kind of giving way to Jordan Battle. Like Battle played 18% of snaps last week, not a large number, but Bell played 84%. And then, but the week before that, it was 10% for Battle and 90% for Bell. So we know that, I mean, Von Bell hasn't been good. Like I think Jordan Battle is the better safety at this point, even if he's younger and inexperienced. Like he proved it last year. I think that he kind of earned that starting spot, and they went out and brought Von Bell back for whatever reason. Lou Anarumo obviously likes him, but again, like starting to see it just like we did kind of last year when it was Nick Scott in the safety room, Jordan Battle kind of making his way into his snaps, and maybe it's becoming something, and we start to see more Jordan Battle as the year goes on, but obviously not in a spot where we can start him just yet. But it does at least have me fading Von Bell even more so this week against the Browns.
I have those guys as like they're like steady volume tacklers, but like at that point, like you're looking at like bye week fill-in type of thing where it's like, but a lot of those in those situations, sometimes I mean, there's cornerbacks available that are just gonna offer higher upside than he is. So
Yep, absolutely. And then on the Brown side of things, anybody stand out to you for this team on defense?
No, Mohamed Dabate, I believe that's how you say it. He had a boom in snap counts last week. I think 74% defensive snap share. Had 2 total tackles last year, and I think he played 1 game early and then hit IR for a few weeks and then came back. Who the hell knows? The Browns got a little bit of New England syndrome when it comes to the linebacker position over like the last decade, where it's one guy and rotational all over the place. So obviously we're gonna trust JOK. Outside of that, nobody. I know Devin Bush kind of had a small run there where he was playing a good amount of snaps. Not trusting anyone there, especially off of a 1 week boom in snap count in a game that they were never in. Myles Garrett, obviously, love the guy, love watching him play, kind of hate seeing what's going on around him. Kind of mentioned a potential trade there. I kind of heard a hypothetical on some Cleveland radio Instagram post or something earlier this week. Kind of got my hopes up, but it was probably just talk. You're expecting your elite edges there to kind of have a bad game from time to time. That 0 against Washington is the one that sticks out the most. That one really hurt. Your TJ Watts, your Max Crosby's will get you that 3 to 7 points every now and again where they're just facing double and triple teams the whole game. But that one was was really tough. From the safety position, still love Grant Delpit. I think missed last week. Rodney McLeod's been really solid, but I think McLeod's kind of fool's gold out here.
Mhm.
He's 2 touchdowns in the last 3 games, which have really boosted his numbers. But yeah, I mean, Delpit's going to be probably the guy you want there in terms of volume tackler and all that. But again, there's probably better options. As much as I like him as a player, and he's young and all that, it's just it's a bad situation there. There's not a lot of teams even really being forced to show their entire offensive repertoire against the Browns at this point, because the Browns offense is so bad.
Yeah, the offense is it's terrible. And yeah, like the good thing that I like about Delpit, at least for this week, like if the Bengals do get up ahead and start to kind of run the ball, at least like we know Delpit will play down in the box. Like he's played
Yep.
48% of his snaps in the box this season. Led to a pretty strong tackle rate, 10.5%.
Yep.
That's a good number for a safety, not so much for a linebacker, Mr. Anzalone. And yeah, like I think he can be considered at least a top option this week, because I'm with you. Like I don't think outside of JOK, who I have as LB15, like I don't think anybody else on that Browns linebacker core is necessarily going to be a huge factor again. Like Jordan Hicks could be back, but we've seen them ease him in before. So coming off injury again, maybe he gets eased in again, and it just creates a bigger mess there. So it's really, yeah, JOK, Delpit, and Myles Garrett that I kind of trust the most on this defense. Let's go to the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants now. And I want to start with another guy that's been not too quiet, because he started to pick up a little bit here recently. Josh Sweat of the Philadelphia Eagles. Andrew Thomas, the Giants left tackle, is going to be out this week. So their replacement is Joshua Ezeudu. He's a former third-round pick. Got some run last year, but did not look good when he was out there. He had a 39.3 pass blocking grade. That was even worse than when his rookie season the year before, which was a 44.9. Josh Sweat could be in a nice spot. He's coming off back-to-back weeks with a sack, 77.4 pass rush grade. I got him as edge 10. The only negative essentially being that Daniel Jones has been actually kind of decent at avoiding
Yeah.
sacks so far this season, which has been nice to see on his part. But I do think that the Eagles will be able to find a way to get home against Daniel Jones, and I think Josh Sweat is going to be kind of the top guy to do that. Other than that, you got your Eagles linebackers there, but Cooper DeJean. So this was somebody that we did talk about in our rookie DB episode, right? And kind of talked about what his position was going to be in the NFL. Well, he finally made his first NFL start last week and played in the slot exclusively as the team's nickel corner. Pretty productive fantasy performance, which included a half snap on a 90 or half sack on a 91% snap share. I do think like it is worth noting for Cooper DeJean that he is the nickel corner. It isn't necessarily, the best spot this week against the Giants to kind of repeat that high snap rate from last week, because the Giants are a team that are right around average in 11 personnel at 64%, which is likely going to take DeJean off the field, or DeJean, however you want to say it. I really don't care. Off the field more than when he faced the Browns last week. The Browns are a top 5 team in 11 personnel at 79%. So he did see that higher snap share. So just something to kind of keep an eye on. If we do see that fluctuating snap share, that's exactly why. So we'll know that he is kind of more of a matchup dependent type option. But yeah, how are you feeling about the Eagles and Cooper here?
Yeah, just to kind of drive that point home on Josh Sweat, I think the 61% defensive snap share was the most among the Eagles edge defenders this year. So I did like that as well. And obviously that's a big plus matchup for him. In terms of Cooper, was I right? He wasn't going to play safety. I didn't think he was going to play outside corner. There was really only one spot, and Avonte Maddox is a liability. I think we've known this for years. But yeah, I mean, it's nice to see. I mean, like, the kid is so talented. Like,
Right.
you could see that. I think that play that's kind of going around, it went viral, where he comes off the I think the left side there, and he just absolutely like bull rushes and wrecks a tackle. Like, is like, I mean, like, this is a cornerback, if you will. So, but yeah, huge to see him get 52 snaps. I think it was. He had 8 snaps prior to that. Primarily your punt returner, if you will. But yeah, to have a boom week like that, it really is probably going to be matchup dependent with what the Eagles are going to do. Really just kind of depends on what you expect them to do at, with like a matchup based thing. I think like in terms of outside corners, I don't see him playing there. I still don't see him playing there unless there's a rash of injuries where they're forced to. But I do think giving his skill set, given his ability, his playmaking ability in the slot is probably the best spot to keep him. We'll see what that happens when he plays kind of some of more of these teams that are a little more like pass heavy and ability to kind of like challenge him. But yeah, super exciting to see him do that, especially those that did ride it out for 6 weeks that spent the draft capital on him. Especially super praise to those people who don't have taxi squads and were able to just keep him on an active roster. I'm sure you didn't start him with his -3 points or -2 points the week before,
Right.
but at least he gives you another option there at DB. Moving on to the Giants side there, the defensive line, really good, obviously leading the NFL in sacks. In terms of outside of Brian Burns, it is really now with Tibbs out, I think Azeez Ojulari is kind of getting more of those consistent snaps. But before that, you had Burns at D-line 9 overall, Ojulari at D-line 40, Tibbs at Thibodeau at D-line 48, and Chapman at D-line 96. So like there was just like a lot going on there where nobody was really getting, outside of Burns, was getting any kind of tackle volume. It was really like sack dependent. But when you lead the NFL in sacks, like these guys, you're fantasy relevant to a certain degree. So Burns with the 3 sacks and a forced fumble in the last 4 games, pretty matchup proof there. There's not going to be a scenario where you're sitting him. But yeah, exciting to watch the Giants because you're getting production from them, from the defensive side of the ball. I'm a little bummed at the linebacker position. Okereke has been, linebacker 33, but he's been pretty horrible. The matchup against Philly's decent, but he did have, as poor as he's playing this year in 2 matchups last year, he totaled 18 tackles and a sack against Philly. So there is some promise there, assuming you're going to start him this week. And then, as you knew, the reason you brought me on, I'm going to have my Tyler Nubin victory lap. So, DB 16 overall, DB 25 in fantasy points per game. Another guy that we both liked, Tyke Smith, is kind of nipping at his heels here, but being the top rookie safety, 26 tackles, 1 forced fumble, and 1 fumble recovery, averaging 8.6 tackles per game over the last 3. He has made Jason Pinnock pretty irrelevant. The big thing with Nubin, why I liked him, obviously, was staying in school for like 80 years and being as polished as he was. And, when you play with Antoine Winfield, at one point, and then he goes on to get his second rookie contract to win a Super Bowl, and then you finally enter the league, you've been in college a bit too long. But these are our COVID babies, I guess, as you will, when it comes to like rookies in the NFL. So but yeah, really like exciting to watch Nubin play too, because you can tell that dude's just the consummate professional. He's out there, he's making plays, and he's definitely shored up something in that Giant secondary that seems like they haven't really had. And then Andrew Phillips, another guy that I think has been a sneaky start this year, and obviously the Philly's a great matchup here, the second most tackles per game to cornerbacks. So that's another solid start this week if you're in a bye week bind. Don't start him over Tyler Nubin, but if you you have a scenario where where you're looking for someone there, Phillips isn't a bad start this week either.
Nice. Like you said, Nubin has been awesome, and he's been the guy to kind of work down more in the box as well, where Jason Pinnock almost none last week. 94% of his snaps came deep, so you love to see that for Tyler Nubin. And then again, just kind of going back to the Giants defensive line, I did want to point out like Brian Burns' matchup against Kirkland Brand, Lane Johnson, Fred Johnson, who has a 35.8 pass blocking grade. You got to love that for Brian Burns' potential this week. Who, yeah, I got his edge 13. And then Aziz Ojulari draws actual Lane Johnson on the other side, who owns an 87.1 pass blocking grade, which is the 5th best mark in the league. So as much as, Ojulari played last week and probably is going to play again and had a good game, I'm not trusting him as much this week going against Lane Johnson. But I do like Brian Burns quite a bit because he should get the other Johnson who's not been as good. Let's go to the Houston Texans and the Green Bay Packers now. And where do you want to start with the Houston defense?
We could start with the defensive line. Will Anderson obviously put the league on notice last week and decided to just absolutely destroy what was left of that New England offensive line. I think you mentioned it earlier. Drake May took 4 sacks, almost all of them to Will Anderson. So, but yeah, extremely. You go from one end of the spectrum to the other. Extremely tough matchup with Green Bay allowing the second fewest sacks per game. Anderson, obviously, the D line won overall last week, but this is kind of a matchup where you're definitely not going to fade him, but you're tempering expectations for sure. Moving on to the linebacker position there, if Azeez Al-Shaair doesn't play, I'm going to be very sad, but that's fitting for the season. Neville Hewitt was included in my players to add this week. He is what he is, right? Like he's had a couple spotty seasons in there. I think mainly with the Jets, where he was kind of putting up some decent numbers. Obviously, I think he's like 31 now. He's not quite the same player, but that Houston linebacker situation seems like a pretty solid bunch there. So waiting for Christian Harris to come back. Henry Tuatu, I believe, is going to be out as well. It sounds like he's in concussion protocol. I'm not sure if he cleared that yet. Obviously, we'll probably figure out a little bit more towards the end of the week. But when you're in a bind, or obviously with Hewitt being pretty much free, if Azeez is on your roster, like that is a guy that I'm probably just trying to scoop up and drop a roster clogger, at least to have that option before that game kicks off.
Yeah, I think you have to, right? Like there's just too many injuries there, and we know that it could be a pretty decent snap share in Houston, right? So, if Azeez Al-Shaair or Henry To'o can't go, like you got to look at Neville Hewitt first. I mean, I know Christian Harris is eligible to return from injured reserve this coming week. I believe he was trending in the right direction, at least to play this week. So that could be really interesting too, because he might be kind of thrown into the fire and have to play at full-time snaps as well. So he'd be somebody that I'd be kind of monitoring the practice reports for this week as well. And then, just going back to that Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, nice to see them kind of break out of their like slower start, right? But I mean, going against Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom, 2 top 15 tackles at their position in pass blocking grade, and Jordan Love has been the best quarterback in the league at avoiding pressures to turn into sacks at 7.5%. So I have both of those guys just outside the top 15 this week, where normally they'd be inside the top 12. But just again, like you said, tempering expectations. So the Houston linebacker situation, it's just one we're going to have to monitor throughout the week. So maybe come back to the comment section if you have questions about it, or check out the rankings page as well, because I'll try to update that as we get news as well. How about on the Green Bay side, John? Anybody stand out to you for the?
Really like what I've seen from Edge Cooper, the rookie, over these past couple weeks. The snaps increasing, 3 straight games of 10 fantasy points or more. Through weeks 4 through 6, he's been the linebacker 26. So have liked some of that. He's definitely an impact play guy. I could see, especially in the coverage game. So he adds a different dynamic to the Green Bay defense. Another guy who's pretty fun to watch overall. So it's excited to see his growth. And then in the secondary there, Javon Bullard having a pretty solid year. He had a little lull there, like weeks 1 and 2, he was pretty strong. Weeks 3 and 4, it seemed like he went back to college. And then, these past couple, he's been solid. I think 7 tackles, or at least 7 tackles in the last 2 games, back-to-back games there. I believe this is the top matchup for safeties and from a tackle perspective
Yeah.
this week. So, and then Keyshawn Nixon is another guy that's just like a sleeper and cornerback required. You're not going to sniff this guy; he's on a roster.
Yeah.
But in those leagues that are just kind of strictly DB, you're probably going to get lucky and have him in there. Seems like he's cornerback 10 overall, but high volume tackling corners are the guys that you want. He's bringing that on a pretty much weekly basis. So that's a guy that keep your eye on. He's seemed like since the Rasul Douglas trade last year, he's been
Right.
kind of stepped into that more of a tackling role for Jair Alexander doesn't have a ton of interest in that. So
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting, right? Because Alexander returned last week, and they kept Keyshawn Nixon on the outside, which I thought was interesting, and they actually let Javon Bullard kind of play more in the slot as well as at safety, right? So Javon Bullard really acted as their nickel corner, and Keyshawn Nixon was just kind of the outside corner. So I do worry about a little bit about Keyshawn Nixon's kind of IDP value dropping a little bit as he's kept away from the action a little bit more, but I really like the matchup for Javon Bullard. Like you said, I got him as safety 15 this week. Still trust Keyshawn Nixon. I think it's a decent matchup here against the Texans, where we're going to see them pass the ball quite a bit,
yeah.
And they're giving up a lot of tackles to the cornerback position. So Keyshawn Nixon's like CB12 for me this week. I still like him quite a bit. And yeah, Xavier McKinney's been fine. Safety 16 didn't keep his 5-game interception streak going, but he'll be solid when you need him. Let's go to Miami and Indianapolis now. And as far as Miami goes, the defensive line not as interested in, not this week with all the injuries. I mean, it's Chop Robinson and Emmanuel Ogba. Those guys are outside the top 45 edges for me, going against this Indianapolis offensive line, which has been among the best in the league. But the linebacker position is kind of interesting, right? Because David Long returned last game, not last week because they were on a bye week, but didn't play like his usual full-time role. He actually split his snaps 50-50 with Anthony Walker. He was likely being eased back into action, but it is one that I kind of want to see if that's going to be the case again this week, because I did see David Long is still questionable heading into this week. So being limited in practice most likely. And I do wonder if, Anthony Walker's going to kind of, see the field a little bit more to kind of ease the workload for David Long again. So I'm tempering expectations for David Long. I got him as LB 45, but Jordan Brooks, I feel fine about. He's like LB 20 for me. And then the only other thing, Javon Holland, he's got a broken hand. I don't think that he's going to play. I don't know. Maybe he does, but Marcus May is kind of his backup there if Javon Holland can't go. And it's a decent matchup for safety tackles allowed. At their 13th, the Colts are in giving safety tackles. But anybody from Miami that you'd want to talk about here, or?
No, I mean, the fact that we're talking about Manny Agba being a top 24 defensive lineman in the year 2024 is pretty crazy. But Jordan Brooks seems to be the guy there. I mean, he's still trying to, figure out that defense. I think I have that on Javon Holland too, adjusting to his third defensive coordinator in 3 seasons. He hasn't cracked 15 fantasy points yet this year. Love Holland. I think I've heard his name, mentioned in some rumor mill stuff because obviously a contract is looming here sooner than later. But yeah, the broken hand, that doesn't help. Putting Jordan Poyer and Marcus May out there, good luck covering anybody. So, but Jordan Brooks obviously averaging 9.6 tackles per game over the last 3. David Long, being banged up a little bit, but hearing David Long and Anthony Walker in the same sentence is pretty rough. Reminds me of some Brown situations at linebacker. So, yeah, it's just something. I mean, Jordan Brooks is the guy that you're going to start, but a bad matchup for the Miami defensive line on top of the fact that they're absolutely decimated with injuries. And Javon Holland, even if he was playing, I mean, I think I'm probably looking elsewhere this week just because he hasn't, there's that, chance to get that 5 to 7 point week. That is, you're like to my point before, you could probably pick up a cornerback with way higher upside than that.
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense. And then On the Colts side of things, Leatu Latu, the rookie first round pick, he actually led the Colts defensive lineman in snaps this past week. It is the first time that's happened this season, and they had Kwity Paye back as well. So he's been pretty good. Like as far as pass rush metrics go, like he hasn't got the sack numbers or anything like that, but now owns a 71.2 pass rush grade on the year, 78.1 defensive grade on the year. Those are both second among rookie defensive linemen, behind only Jared Verse, who's been amazing so far. So I'm not like rushing to put Latu in a lineup. Like he's edge 28 for me, but I did at least think it was promising that the snap share is now there, and potentially, hopefully, will that'll continue this week, and then maybe he could start getting home with some sacks because it's not a terrible matchup against Tyler Huntley and that Miami offensive line. But really, I mean, EJ Speed is also he was a did not practice today, which is Wednesday, so we'll see what happens there. There's still a lot of time before this game, and that could just be a precautionary thing, and he'll be back out there Thursday, Friday, which will eliminate any concern. But if EJ Speed can't go, it's Jalen Carley's, who is the third linebacker there for Indianapolis. So just keep an eye on that name, and maybe a speculative ad right now before Thursday practice reports come out. And if Speed practices, then we drop Carley's. But just something to kind of keep an eye on there for the Colts defense. And then Nick Cross, it was the only other player that I wanted to talk about. He started the season with three straight games of double-digit tackles. He's now gone 3 straight games below double-digit tackles, but not really like a huge concern as far as I'm concerned. Like it's very normal for the position, especially considering that he's played below average teams in tackles allowed to opposing safeties in all 3 of his most recent games. He does draw a better matchup this week against Miami, who ranked top 10 in tackles allowed per game to the safety position, even with a backup quarterback. But Cross, I think, much like Grant Delpit, who we talked about earlier, like he's going to play in the box quite a bit, which we like to see in Gus Bradley's defense, and that really is going to help his case to kind of maintain that high end tackle efficiency that he's had on the season too. 13.5% tackle rate for Nick Cross, which has been excellent. Those are just slightly above linebacker average numbers, which I still feel pretty good about Nick Cross. I'll tell you exactly where I have him ranked because I don't think I made a note of it. Safety 3 this week. So yeah, Still feeling pretty good about him.
Yeah, Latu, I think another guy I did an IDP rookie profile on. Definitely the most polished pass rusher I felt in this class. Impact play dependent. I think he's got 4 this year. The big thing, I mean, and he's a rookie. It's expected. I think he's got 1 tackle or less in 4 out of the 6 games. So obviously not super encouraging for IDP managers, but figuring the decimation that has already happened among the defensive linemen. He's not a bad start. Miami giving up the 4th most sacks this year. So, and obviously the defensive snap share last week is super encouraging. Nick Cross, wild that Nick Cross, EJ Speed, and I believe Zaire all have 60 tackles on the season. It's like this little internal battle. But Jalen Carley's actually was included this week in the players to add. I did not know of the EJ Speed injury at the time, but it was, I'll be honest, looking for linebackers to add right now is a wasteland. And obviously he's seen some shares there, and also Indy for the longest time, going back to the Shaq Leonard days, or Darius Leonard, however you want to call him, has always been like that kind of 2 system, 100% of the snaps linebacker system there. So in the event that one of those 2 went down, I did feel like Carley's is a player who could step in. He's shown some flash there. And Nick Cross, DB1 overall on the season so far, pretty matchup proof there. Tied for 4th in the NFL in tackles. Obviously with his teammates and Budda Baker, I believe. So, Cross has been, kind of that cheat code stuff that we talk about all the time, where he's getting linebacker tackles at a safety. Those guys are come around very rarely, so you really need to take advantage. I've seen in a lot of my deeper leagues, people asking for high draft picks for him. Obviously, I'm just gonna keep my opinions to myself. But can't really argue with like what's going on with him from the just him and Buda Baker. I think are like neck and neck at the tops as the top safety right now, and it's
Yeah.
really the tackle volume that's huge, and that's just something that you can't really, when you're getting that consistently like that, that is just like the ultimate like great feeling. You know what I mean? No,
Yeah.
it's the definition of having a Justin Jefferson type of guy. You're just gonna get him out there and he's gonna get you 20 points. So
Yeah. Yeah, he's been amazing. And like you said, yeah, that's kind of the nice thing about like Carly's, as far as just this defensive system, right? Where if one of those guys does go down, Franklin or Speed, like there's a potentially full-time role there in a good defense for tackles to the linebacker position. So I'm with you. I think, Carly's, if you've got the roster space, I think worth an ad right now. Let's go to the Seattle Seahawks and the Atlanta Falcons. John, where do you want to start with these two teams?
Seattle defensive line been getting a little bit healthier and a little bit making a bigger impact. Derek Hall really coming on. I think 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles over the past month of the season there. Not a great matchup. Atlanta allowing the 4th fewest sacks per game. Boy Mafe is back, I believe.
Mhm.
Onowosu is also back. I'm not sure if that's in a full capacity or if is he still hurt?
He
I'm
went
not.
back to IR.
Did he? All right.
Yeah.
Scrap that one. But yeah, Seattle defensive line is not, the name value really isn't there, but it is nice to see some production there from Derek Hall. That was a little bit unexpected on my end. Julian Love have just kind of adored that guy anywhere he's went. He just seems to produce. DB4 right now, one of 3 safeties with averaging over 20 fantasy points per game, and some of those higher scoring formats there. Him and Rayshon Jenkins honestly are pretty solid starts there. You can definitely do way worse. I wish the Bengals would take note.
Yeah. And I think Rayshawn Jenkins, I want to say I just saw something that he may have got placed on IR
Yeah,
as
I know he was playing with like a club on his hand for a little bit there, but
yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, he's on IR.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
brutal.
Julian Love should get, should even see more,
Yeah.
tackles in that there. I do like Love a lot. I think he's pretty matchup proof at this point. Devon Witherspoon, another guy that super exciting. Not on pace to touch last year's
Right.
insane fantasy point total, but he's the top, I believe the top cornerback friendly matchup for
Yeah.
this week with Atlanta. So Witherspoon should be in a position to be challenged a lot and kind of have some opportunities there.
Yeah.
So overall for Seattle, I mean, Tyrell Dodson and Jerome Baker are, that's going to continue since the beginning of time to be a linebacker friendly system. Those guys are smashing there. Seems like they're kind of taking turns there, but Baker, hurt for a little bit, came back with like a vengeance with like a 17 tackle game or
Yeah.
something like that. So I think those linebackers are pretty much plug and play starters at this point, especially with a lot of the inconsistency going on around the league at linebacker. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, Julian Love, probably the guy that I would like the most from Seattle this week as a featured player.
Yeah. No, I think I'm with you. I think Love definitely kind of been the main guy. As well. And yeah, I mean Dodson and Baker have been really solid. Witherspoon, like you said, I mean, still really good tackling corner. But yeah, imagine that the big plays were unstable year to year. Who could have seen that coming? But that being said, like he's got ideal alignments. It's an ideal matchup as well for like an 11 personnel heavy team in Atlanta where he's going to play in the slot a decent amount and potentially get some tackles there. And Atlanta is giving up the top 5 most tackles to the cornerback position. But yeah, other than that, on the Falcons side of things, anybody that you would want to start with on this team?
No, I wish Matt Judon would ever get a sack again. That would be great.
I don't
I
know.
think last I checked, Atlanta was dead last in pressures and dead last in sacks. I think that was prior to last week, but I'm sure not much has changed. In terms of the linebacker position there. Yeah, Obviously, Anderson, I believe, is slated to miss another week. I'm not sure if that is for sure yet. Nate Landman came back last week. Caden Ellis has been there. Those guys are both, top 45-ish in fantasy points per game. Anderson, with that massive week that he had, I think it was against New Orleans, he's jumped all the way up to linebacker 2. Would like to see him back because I think that's the guy in terms of the IDP community that we really, get excited about and think could be, a big name there at the linebacker position. Going to the secondary, I mean, Jesse Bates is going to Jesse Bates every week, so don't worry about that. In terms of Justin Simmons, I've always viewed Justin Simmons as more of like a interception dependent or big play dependent safety. Him landing in Atlanta was wild to me because I felt like Jesse Bates already kind of had a lot of what Justin Simmons does well on lock. So, and then obviously that just completely removed Richie Grant from the entire IDP life. So, but yeah, the tackle volume just not being there. I don't have a ton of interest. I don't know if Simmons is battling injury or anything either. I didn't see anything on that, but unless he's playing Patrick Mahomes, I don't think you can guarantee that INT. So you kind of kind of want to look for better options there.
Yeah, and I think like he did just leave last game late with a hamstring injury, so we'll see if he actually ends up playing or not this week. But if he can't go, Richie Grant it could be a fine option. It's not a bad matchup for safety tackles. Seattle among the top 10 there in giving up tackles to the safety position. But yeah, it's probably Jesse Bates that you want there more than anybody. I'm with you. I don't know if Anderson is going to be back or not. He's probably going to miss this week. If he does come back, I'm probably just waiting between him and Landman to kind of see what happens there for at least 1 week, right? To see if we get that rotation that we were getting earlier in the season where those guys were playing specific roles in the Landman, I think, was playing early downs. Anderson was playing the later downs. So we'll see what happens when both of those guys are healthy at the same time again. But yeah, other than that, I mean, Judon, like you said, like I touched on him in the recap episode, he just hasn't been good this season. He played a season high 74% snap share this past week, but didn't result in anything. Just 3 assisted tackles. He's not going to line up exclusively against Charles Cross this week. He does play both sides, so he'll see some Stone Forsythe, who's been really bad, but Geno Smith at least has done a nice job kind of avoiding sacks. We've seen that from Geno against some top pass rushers. So, Judon is no longer that. Okay, I do want to give a quick shout out, one more ad break here to LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just the job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/PFF fantasy. That's linkedin.com/PFF fantasy to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's go to the Las Vegas Raiders and the Los Angeles Rams. And I want to start with the Raiders and Divine Diablo specifically. Obviously, we're trusting Robert Spillane. He's been excellent this season. But Divine Diablo played 93% of snaps last week. But it was against a run-heavy Pittsburgh Steelers offense. It led to a pretty good game for him, 6 tackles and a sack. The Rams are more of a pass-heavy offense, so I imagine that 93% snap share was solely because of the matchup, and we're probably going to see less of Diablo this week, even though it's a top 10 matchup for linebacker tackles. I just trust Robert Spillane to get those tackles a lot more. I don't know that Diablo is going to be out there enough to put together, a strong IDP performance. So we'll see if that's the trend or not. But this week at least should be at least telling in that regard. And then Max Crosby, I mean, he's going against the worst pass blocking unit in the NFL right now. He's edge one for me this week. I don't need to expand too much on that. So the only other thing was Nate Hobbs, who surpassed Jacorian Bennett in snap share this past week. So he moved from a nickel only role, well, in most weeks, right, to kind of handling like the outside corner and slot role. This past week, I talked about him in the recap as well. So it's possible that this is kind of something that is going to be a trend going forward, or it could be inconsistent. But I think, again, this week could be a little bit more telling in how the Raiders are going to deploy these guys, whether we want to trust Nate Hobbs a little bit more regularly, because he did have a really nice game last week, as far as tackles goes, his best game of the season. So if he's going to be back in that full-time role, then he becomes a little less matchup dependent, at least, and we could trust him more. But the Rams are one of those teams that play a ton of 11 personnel anyways, most in the league, for the most part, them in Atlanta. So we're going to see him in the slot either way quite a bit. So like the matchup for Nate Hobbs. Anybody else for the Raiders for you?
No, I would. I'm kind of like. I agree on the Diablo point, especially when I think the Raiders are grasping at straws. They know they're going to be a top 3 to 5 pick in this draft coming up because they need a quarterback so bad. Robert Spillane is definitely smashing each and every week. Him and Max Crosby, there's that was one of the things in my notes. There's just no such thing as a bad matchup for those guys. You know what I mean? They're just they're killing it every week. Nate Hobbs, I was encouraged. Obviously double digit tackles for a corner is obviously super encouraging. I know Isaiah Palomalo ended up he's been coming on the scene over the last couple weeks. But that's a guy in maybe like deeper leagues to see how he plays out. I think it was a recommendation to add him for those teams that are 1-5-ish, 1-6-ish heading into this week. Maybe stash him, hope he gets some value, or someone's willing to come get him as a young safety there. So, but yeah, not too much that's exciting on the Raiders defensive side of the ball outside of just watching Max Crosby wreck a game again, which is always fun.
Yeah, let's hope so. It was a quieter week for Max last week. Just I think the half sack, so hopefully he could get a little bit more than that this week. On the Rams side of things, I guess we'll start with the linebackers, because it is somewhat interesting now, because Troy Reeder saw an actual decrease in his usage in week 5, prior to the team's bye week, where both him and Christian Roseboom didn't really play much at all on like third down. So I'm wondering, if the teams are going to kind of if the team is going to kind of want to stick with that going forward, considering that Troy Reeder and Christian Roseboom are not good. And you may want to get more defensive backs on the field. This isn't like something, crazy for NFL teams to do, especially when your linebackers are Christian Roseboom and Troy Reeder. So basically, I've pushed Troy Reeder way down the ranks. I'm not treating him as a full-time linebacker this week. He's LB 40 for me. It's also like just kind of an average matchup as far as tackles go. So Troy Reeder's somebody I think we're going to have to kind of monitor the usage here. I think the team is going to start kind of going away from him, it feels like, but we'll have to see how that shakes out. But how are you feeling about this Rams linebacker group? Anybody that is interesting to you?
My notes say they suck, but they contribute.
Right.
So over the last 3 games, I think I have them 50 tackles combined for the two. I have a little bit more faith in Christian Roseboom, but he's also not good. But Troy Reeder is terrible. I know Omar Spates is a guy that a lot of people have been in on. Stashing him for this long as with zeros every single week has been pretty tough. You would like to see some sort of increase in snaps or anything there. Doesn't seem like that's on the horizon. It seems like they're moving more towards putting more defensive backs on the field. My boy Cameron Kitchens has kind of seen some increase in snaps. He was included in the players to add this week. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Obviously, they can't just play all safeties at linebacker, but they would probably get more out of those guys. But that's my opinion. So, but yeah, I'm not. I wouldn't try. I wouldn't be looking to start either of these guys, but Christian Roseboom specifically, it just seems like he's been a little bit more of a high volume tackler. I see a little bit of the Alex Singleton growth in him, where I feel like at some point, if he's continuously given these opportunities, he can be that like 10, 12 tackle a game guy, because that's just the Ram system. But I don't know if he's going to be given that chance much longer, judging like how terrible these guys are, like both to the eye test and the grading
Right.
test every week. It's pretty
Yeah.
bad. And then obviously, obviously be remiss to not talk about Jared Verse, who is just
Oh man.
insane. Vegas allowing 4 sacks per game on the road. So this is, obviously a great matchup for him. The rookie defensive line DL1, DL21 overall, and DL13 in fantasy points per game. So really, just, you know, want to give you your props for being so right on him. I mean,
So
like
good.
I know that was, that was a guy you loved during
Yeah.
that process. Another guy coming out of nowhere, Quentin Lake.
Yeah.
Obviously expected Cam Curl to kind of be the guy there. Quentin Lake being the DB10 in fantasy points per game, Curl all the way down just inside the top 50. Just the higher volumes of tackles there is really
Right.
like the big deal. Curl, I know, left the last game right before the bye with a back injury. Does sound like he's cleared to play, so there shouldn't be any issues there. But yeah, I mean the Cam Curl that we got in Washington is obviously not we kind of have the great value version going on and for the Rams right now. But just kind of urging IDP managers just to stay patient. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not a guy that I would move off of. He's not Javon Hollanding you at the moment. It's just it's not what it was. You know what I mean? So but I do think that can potentially turn around here. So obviously he's proven that over his career that he's he's a contributor. So
Yeah. And I think like there is at least a chance that the usage kind of turns around too, because like the week before the bye week, we did see kind of some personnel changes in the secondary for the Rams where well, first Tre'Davious White was a healthy scratch in that game. Darius Williams came back from IR, so he played his
yeah,
first game. And then Kobe Durant actually took over the slot corner role where Quentin Lake had been playing a lot of his snaps. That moved Quentin Lake more deep, and it allowed Cam Curl to play more in the box.
yeah,
And then that was the week that we saw Cam Curl outproduce Quentin Lake for essentially the first time this season, right?
yeah,
So we'll see, if they've got things any better sorted than that coming out of the bye week, and if it looks the same, or if it's completely different again. But again, another one of those kind of things that I definitely want to kind of watch this week.
yeah.
So I have Quentin Lake like one spot ahead of Cam Curl this week at safety 25, Curl safety 26. It's not an amazing matchup, so I do want to see if that kind of shakes out where Curl gets the better usage. Then yeah, there's a chance that he could be moving ahead of Quentin Lake in the rankings going forward as well. How about on Carolina and Washington now? Where would you like to start with these two teams?
Carolina, obviously Trevin Wallace. This is
Yeah.
a pretty weak linebacker class overall. Edge Cooper kind of coming on over the last couple weeks has been encouraging, but we haven't seen much of a lot of the other guys there. So Trevin Wallace kind of forced into duty there due to Carolina just being everyone being down.
Mhm.
But I think it's over for Shaq Thompson. I don't see a scenario where he's kind of back. Josie Jewell is, I don't know what to say there. So Trevin Wallace, 24 tackles over the last 2 games, has looked I mean, the best that you could look for a rookie
Yeah.
linebacker. He's getting, the high volume of tackles there from an IDP standpoint. Trevor Wallace was not, a guy we were spending high draft capital on. So to get this return from him, heading into week 7 already, going on his third start, like this is definitely encouraging. Good matchup for the Carolina safeties, but there's not a ton there that I'm like willing to like go out and Xavier Woods, I
Right.
mean, if you will, but like, there's not like that's not like I'm probably looking elsewhere, even though it's a good spot. It's bye week fill in is probably what I'm looking at in
Y-
that scenario. So outside of that, Carolina doesn't offer much. DJ Johnson's a guy I picked up for
Right.
free a few, kind of a 3 weeks into the season. Losing Derek Brown was a killer. LeBrian Ray, sorry, he's a guy that I had picked up in some of those D tackle premium leagues because he's getting a little bit of run there, having some decent games here and there. But yeah, Carolina as a whole is very poor on defense. And it's the Trevin Wallace show, if you will.
That's literally like all there is, right? Like, I mean, like Ashawn Robinson and like you said, DJ Johnson, like their volume plays, right, for those positions. But God, it's barren for IDP potential here in Carolina right now. Like Trevin Wallace, like he's been playing 100% of snaps. I do worry like slightly if Jose Jewell comes back this week.
Mhm.
If Jewell takes over that 100% snap linebacker role, which I mean, I think it just makes sense considering, he's a veteran and he has the experience and blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, where, they've shown a tendency to just kind of deploy one full-time linebacker. So I could imagine, Trevor Wallace kind of being demoted to that 70 to 75% snap role, which could still be fine, depending on the matchup, but it does push him down the ranks a little bit. So like I'm treating Jewell as back right now, and he's like LB 26 for me. Trevor Wallace is like LB 36. So it's nothing crazy there. Like you said, there's just not a lot to be excited about for the Carolina IDPs. So why don't we try to find something in the Washington IDPs? And no, everybody's injured. Dorrance Armstrong's hurt. Jonathan Allen is hurt. Anybody on Washington stand out to you that you'd like to talk about here?
Dante Fowler was an ad this week for me.
Okay.
Dan Quinn, I really like. He has just taken like every cast off at edge and been like, I'm gonna get something out of these guys. And to his point, he has. He's got a pretty big week out of Fowler. He's got a pretty big week out of Dorrance Armstrong before he got hurt. I think he had a decent week out of Cleveland Farrell early in the season too. So he's getting some production there, but it's kind of a lot like some of those like super depth positions where none of these guys are high volume tacklers. They're kind of sack dependent. Obviously, Washington is just hit the ground running on offense, which has really helped out with these pass rushers because you're able to just kind of pin your ears back and get after opposing quarterbacks. But yeah, the Jonathan Allen injury is huge for those edge rushers too, right? Like there's not that worry for opposing offensive line anymore. So the one guy obviously seeing Jeremy Chin with a little bit of a bounce back here, double digit fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 and 90% snap share. Obviously still a little bit inconsistent and definitely not the rookie Jeremy Chin that we saw in Carolina all those years ago, but encouraging to kind of see him, making some headway there. And Dante Fowler, obviously with a multi-sack game last week, and with the injuries up front there, the snap share there is still up in the air of like what we're actually going to see on a consistent basis. But guy was a top 5 pick for a reason, right? Like so with all the injuries, especially a crucial one there in Detroit, like you're grasping and trying to find anything you can on the waiver wire at defensive line, and Dante Fowler is available in just about every league. So
yeah, he's going to play a lot, basically at this point, right? And the only thing is like that Carolina offensive line has been excellent this year as far as pass blocking goes. So I do worry that like none of these guys really have the juice to kind of overcome that matchup. But at least for volume purposes, maybe they fall into a few tackles and maybe get lucky with a sack. But just might be harder to kind of pinpoint who that guy's going to be this week. But Fowler's probably the best bet. I mean, yeah, like you said, Dorrance Armstrong not going to most likely play this week. Jonathan Allen's injured. Jerzon Newton, the rookie second round pick, probably going to be another guy that plays a lot more. Another volume dependent play though, right? Like he hasn't shown much in underlying metrics, but at least he'll be on the field quite a bit. And yeah, Jeremy Chin, I mean, interesting, like 57% in the snaps in the box last week, I think it was. It just hasn't been efficient with his opportunities. Like, and it's not like the best matchup either. The Panthers give it up the 20th most tackles to the safety position. So let's go on to the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers next. And we'll start with the Chiefs just quickly talking about their linebackers. I mean, Nick Bolton, like he's LB 19 for me this week. I know he's been fairly quiet. It's not a great matchup. Even though the 49ers are kind of like a run heavy team, they're not giving up a lot of tackles to the linebacker position. So that's kind of like a rare combination. We don't see a lot, but so Nick Bolton, just again, just kind of a low end kind of LB2 or mid range LB2 at this point. And then the rest of the Chiefs, like Chamari Connor, he's been somebody that's popped on a few weeks with some big plays and stuff like that. And he's another guy that his snap share does tend to fluctuate week to week based on the offense that they're facing. And going against the 49ers this week, the 49ers are one of those teams that rank below average in 11 personnel rate. So that's going to be a contributing factor for, those nickel corners or guys like a Chamari Connor to get on the field a little bit more. So I imagine that he's going to be on the lower end of things this week, and not somebody that I'm necessarily trusting, where Justin Reed is probably the guy that I trust the most this week. I got him as safety 18. The 49ers giving up the second most tackles per game to the safety position. Even Brian Cook's been pretty solid at times as well, right? So yeah, how about you? Anybody stand out for Kansas City for you?
No, I mean it's Bolton or bust at the linebacker
Yeah.
position for me, and it's not been great there. I mean, Drew Tranquil has been, Steve Spagnuolo is, loves to play matchups, loves to fluctuate snap percentages based on the matchup. So it's really hard to trust. The guys that you can trust are your Chris Jones, your Nick Bolton, your Justin Reed. So, I mean, at all three levels, those are probably your guys there. That's who I would stick with. Shamari Connor, definitely a breakout season. DB 33 right now. He was obviously free this year.
Yep.
But yeah, with the snap count being, up in the air, the matchup not being favorable, you're almost fading Chiefs defenders like you are their offensive players, at this point. So, yeah, I would, I don't expect this to be half as good as the Super Bowl was. So, but, I guess it's nice to kind of get that game on the schedule, at least from an excitement standpoint.
Yeah, we could only hope that it'll be as good as the Super Bowl, but yeah, unlikely given all the injuries. And the 49ers have injuries of their own, right? At the safety position, specifically, Talanoa Hufanga is on injured reserve. Malik Mustafa, who had been replacing him, he suffered an ankle injury last game, so he's out potentially. I don't know actually if he's going to be playing for sure. But George Odom replaced him. I mean, this is not. Again, like for those super deep leagues, if you're looking for a safety replacement, George Odom is a name. But yeah, Jair Brown also. But other than that, I mean, like Nick Bosa, obviously feeling good about him. He's been amazing. Fred Warner, amazing LB1. Devondre Campbell, he hasn't been very efficient. But again, I like the matchup this week. He's basically a full-time player. So giving up Kansas City, giving up the second most tackles per game to the linebacker position. So I got Devondre Campbell as LB24 this week. Not nothing exciting from him, but I trust the matchup a little bit. But Fred Warner's basically the LB1. So yeah, anybody for San Francisco for you?
Campbell was the guy that stuck out the most just because of the matchup and, obviously being a full-time player there. But yeah, the injuries to the safety position there suck. I know Jair Brown, I think's DB 30 on the season so far. So having a decent season for him. But yeah, losing Hafunga and Mustafa was actually playing well as well.
Yeah.
So losing both of those guys, I would expect it to be a little bit of a long night for San Francisco secondary, but it is Patrick Mahomes, and he's been wildly inconsistent this year. So who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch for sure. So yeah, nothing too crazy surprisingly for that one to go into. So let's go on to Sunday night football. The New York Jets at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Where would you like to start with these two teams?
The Jets coming off that short week there. Will McDonald and Quinnen Williams there. I know Will McDonald's just been a big surprise, but also like boom bust.
Yeah.
I think 7 sacks and 2 forced fumbles, but also has 2 games with 1 fantasy point. So, you got to take the good with the bad there, I guess. Quinnen Williams is, going to do what Quinnen Williams does. So, been a bit inconsistent, obviously, from a defensive tackle position. There's, at times there's just not much you can do about that when you're the player on the defensive line. The CJ Mosley, Jamie Sherwood situation is by far the most interesting on this team. Mosley returning last week with a 13% snap share was a little bit alarming. Like, why bring him back? You know what I mean? When you could have had that extra long rest, but and then kind of coming into a short week, if you will, of playing on Monday and then playing again on Sunday is I don't want to say fade this matchup, but I would definitely be a little weary because, I mean, this was coming from Robert Saleh, who's obviously not there anymore. But it seems like the team really believes in Jamin Sherwood, a guy that we had kind of spoke about a couple seasons ago before he had, in the pre-draft process, converted, safety into a linebacker, tweener type of player. But the guy's good, man. Like when you watch him play, like you could see him making an impact. And CJ Mosley is, as good as he's been. He's been, kind of, you know, off and on the field with injuries over the years and getting up there in age. So wouldn't be completely surprised if Jamian Sherwood cut into some snaps, especially if the Jets start to struggle a little bit. But Quincy Williams isn't going to come off the field, so it's really kind of seems like it's a matter of whether Mosley is back as a full-time player or not. But also I expect Mosley when he gets back to full health. Like I don't imagine them keeping him off the field,
Right.
but I don't think I would drop Jamian Sherwood. I think that in a scenario where either of those guys get hurt, a little bit more of the Indy situation that we were talking about before is Sherwood steps in as a full-time player, and obviously we've seen what he can do in
Yeah.
short little stints here. So not a guy I would drop. Ashton Davis, I think, is coming off like a massive game against Buffalo there. But not a guy I'm super high on. But depending on where we got here for a matchup, I don't think it's great, right? So yeah, I'm not super excited. Obviously Justin, in a little bit of a shocking move there, Justin Fields getting yanked there for Russell Wilson. You would expect that Pittsburgh offense changes a little bit, but to what degree? I'm assuming because it's Russell Wilson, it'll be for the worse. But don't really know how that's going to impact the Jets defense without seeing Russ play a game yet for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Yeah, with Ashton Davis, like just Chuck Clark's on IR, so he's really, that's the reason that he's going to be playing. But yeah, the linebacker situation is absolutely the most interesting thing, right? So like, what do you kind of do with these guys? I guess this week, where like I got CJ Mosley as LB 34 this week, just because there's like part of me that's kind of hedging a little bit, right? Like it's a good matchup on paper as far as tackles allowed to the linebacker position goes. It's actually the best matchup.
Yep.
But there's this risk right now where we saw him only play the 10 defensive snaps when he came back last week. So are they going to continue to ease him in? Maybe it should be more than 10, but how much more than 10, right? So there's that part of it that just kind of scares me a little bit from trusting CJ Mosley this week. And it doesn't make me feel any better about Sherwood this week, but I'm with you. Like, I think, there's absolutely a chance for Sherwood to kind of emerge in the future here as a starter, but we got to see it, right? So we got to see what they do now with all three of these guys healthy. And this will be the week to kind of tell us what to do with these guys, where if you're desperate, you don't have any other options, you play CJ Mosley. It's a nice matchup to do that, and just kind of hope that he, that was just a 1 week type thing, and that he's going to be deployed as a 100% player again. Otherwise, yeah, we just kind of wait and see if we have other options. So, yeah, it's just going to be interesting to kind of watch there on Sunday night. And then just quickly, like on Will McDonald and Quinnen Williams too, just like both those guys got sacks last week against Buffalo. Obviously 7 sacks for McDonald. Steelers offensive line hasn't been great. Russell Wilson's at quarterback, who we know invites pressure himself and will take sacks, right? So Will McDonald draws Broderick Jones, who 41.7 pass block grade on the year. That's 69th among 74 offensive tackles. McDonald, like, just fine pass rush metrics on the season, 67.0 pass rush grade. Like, he's probably a regression candidate at some point, even if it's like next year, right? But nice matchup this week, at least for Russ, with his tendency to take sacks. And then was nice to see Quinnen Williams show signs of life last week. I know it's been a slow start to the year for him, but he had his best pass rush grade of the year with an 86.3 against one of the toughest offensive lines in the leagues in Buffalo, right? So I'm starting to feel better about Quinnen Williams as well. But yeah, that's just kind of the Jets for me. How about the Steelers, John? How are you feeling about that team?
Patrick Queen kind of starting off a little slow there, learning a kind of new system there, but has been the linebacker 16 from week 3 on. So some encouraging signs of life there. I know Peyton Wilson is kind of cutting in there and playing some time. Obviously not affecting him as much as probably Landon Roberts, but ideally Queen and Peyton Wilson would probably be what IDP managers would like to see. Get a Landon Roberts out of here. But Alex Highsmith, I don't have an update on him, but I know he's been out a couple weeks. I think Nick Herbig is also out. So I'm just concerned here. If it's TJ Watt, obviously you're smash starting him. obviously whoever that is, but in what capacity is Highsmith returning? Is he returning, because he's fully healthy, or is he returning because he's going to give you just enough? So obviously I don't, with Edge being a little hurt and guys on bye and things like that, it's going to be it's going to be slim pickings there. So if Highsmith has a chance to play and you're rostering him, there's probably a good chance you have him in your lineup. Obviously, the Jets don't seem to be blocking anybody these days, so not a bad matchup.
Yeah.
Deshaun Elliott obviously been a pretty nice surprise this year. DB12 in fantasy points per game. I believe it is a pretty tough matchup for the safety position there, though. And I know he's kind of taking some friendly shots at Mike Tomlin already on Twitter this week, so I'm sure they're gonna try to devise some sort of game plan where he does not play well.
Yeah, I saw that. That was interesting. Yeah, we'll see what happens with Deshaun Elliott. But yeah, I mean, he's been like super efficient, right? Like
Yeah,
14.7% tackle rate on the year, like playing more in the box, got some big plays in there. It'll be a test this week to see if he could keep it going against the Jets. Were giving up the 26th most tackles to the safety position, but yeah, we'll see. Highsmith, I'm assuming he's back this week. I know Herbig will be out. I mean, hopefully Highsmith is back because Jeremiah Moon sucks. He's not good
yes.
at all. Like it's just a terrible option. So yeah, we'll hopefully get Highsmith back this week. But yeah, I'm with you. Like Patrick Queen, I mean, he's like a LB3 for me. Like in that LB3 range. Sorry, not the LB3 overall. Like just
Yeah.
a below average matchup for a below average tackler, right? So let's go on to one of two Monday night football games, overlapping Monday night football games. Who doesn't love that? I know I hate that so much. But I'll start with the Baltimore Ravens and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And on the Baltimore side, Tampa Bay, they have a really good offensive line, but Baker Mayfield is taking some sacks. So it's kind of like a coin flip matchup, right? Where Odafe Owe, who's been playing well, Kyle Van Noy, who's been playing well, like if they could win against this offensive line, like there's a chance that they could put up those numbers, but it's going to be hard to win against this offensive line, right? So that's kind of the coin flip part of it. So like always, like Owe and Van Noy are kind of in that edge range for me at least this week. But Kyle Hamilton is the most interesting one. I think him and actually Marlon Humphrey are both really interesting this week because Hamilton's usage has been trending in the right direction these past few weeks, where he's playing less in the slot and more in the box. Where, it's not like the slot is bad, but we want those guys in the box more than anything, and that's helped his overall production. Right, it was a quieter week for him this past week, but I think the usage is a positive for him kind of going forward. And I still like Kyle Hamilton obviously quite a bit. He's safety 10 for me. But Marlon Humphrey is the one I think that I'm most interested in. He's CB1 for me this week.
Yeah.
He's been splitting his time in the slot and out wide now with Kyle Hamilton's shift in usage. And it's led to like strong fantasy production for his position. Like this week, I think he has a good chance to keep that momentum going in a favorable matchup against Tampa Bay, who are yielding the second most tackles per game to the cornerback position. And the Bucs also spend 76% of their offensive snaps in 11 personnel, so that'll keep Humphrey in the slot as well. So I really like him this week. How are you feeling about them?
Yeah, Baltimore's defensive line is frustrating, right? Like there just isn't that guy there. So a lot of it is kind of I think Travis Jones is their top fantasy points per game at like DL 51. But Van Noy obviously getting, linebacker treatment at times as well is kind of, probably a reason why when he's not classified as a defensive lineman, depending on the format. But yeah, like those guys are exciting, but I think a lot of they're getting a lot of sacks, a lot of volume. A lot of that is due to, this Baltimore offense going up on teams. And I think that's where you're going to see Baker kind of crumble a little bit, is if Baltimore is able to get up on Tampa Bay. I think a lot of the illusion that you're going to run the ball as well as you ran it a week ago, where they had like nearly like 300 yards or something like that. I don't see that happening on Baltimore. So I think there's going to be a lot of more, forced into the pass type of situations. But always probably the guy, as you said there, at no point, like going back to the last game of Landon Roberts and Kyle Van Noy are the like two guys that even if you're desperate, you're like, nah. So, and then Kyle Hamilton is just the fact that he is so good and so versatile. I mean, I think we've seen this with Derwin over the years too. Is like when you're that dynamic, like your usage can change from week to week, and obviously it's not. There's going to be probably more oftentimes than not that it's not going to be the best for fantasy football, but like when you're that like dynamic and good, like it's really just going to depend on game script. Like at no point am I sitting Kyle Hamilton if he's on my roster. I really don't care who he's playing. But yeah, Marlon Humphrey, I'm 100% with you on. Like he's just, even when you're watching the games, he's jumping off the film at you, right? Like he's around every play, every time someone's there, he's or making a tackle, trying to knock out the ball, or he's somewhere around, and the usage changing, like that's big for him. Like he's going to be able to get more opportunities there, and obviously a slam dunk of a matchup. So.
Yeah, love Marlon Humphrey this week. And then on the Tampa Bay side, let's start with a cornerback there as well, one that plays in the slot too, and one that we talked about in the pre-draft process and the post-draft process, Tyke Smith of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who had a big game again last week, but only a 60% snap share in week 6. And that is entirely dependent on, the offense that he faces. Right. And if the offense isn't going to be an 11 personnel a lot, then Tyke Smith isn't going to be playing a full-time role. Right. So he played 60% last week. This week, I think he's going to be in for a less than ideal snap share again, which just makes him more difficult to trust against the Ravens, who the Ravens are actually the lowest rate of snaps in 11 personnel this season at 28%. So that just, I think, hurts Tyke Smith more than anyone else on this Tampa Bay defense. And, I know the big plays are nice and they're enticing to chase, but they're also not stable week to week, year to year, whatever, right? So we want the snaps more than anything, and it's just not an ideal matchup for Tyke Smith this week. So I am fading him a little bit more. He's like all the way down to CB 36 for me this week. And then the Tampa Bay defensive line against this is another tough matchup in the trenches here, because the Ravens offensive line is one of the best in the league. Lamar Jackson, amazing at avoiding sacks. But Yaya Diaby's been really good, like 82.8 pass rush grade on the year. Just the one sack, like he's somebody that's due. Like maybe it's not this week. Like, this would typically be like a no Diaby week, but he's been so good here in year 2. Like I think he's one of those guys that kind of a sneaky buy low candidate in Dynasty if you can, because he hasn't been productive yet. But all the pass rush metrics are saying that this guy's taken a breakout season here for Yaya Diaby. So definitely somebody to keep in mind for future weeks. And if you could get in on him now at a decent price before he blows up and those pass rush metrics turn into sacks, he becomes really interesting to me. So how are you feeling about him?
Tyke Smith, we'll start with him. The elite production over the last 2 weeks, 16 tackles, 2 forced fumbles, and an interception in the last 2 games. Those are, obviously it's a very what have you done for me lately type of game that we play. So I wouldn't fault people that are going in that, but I love that nugget there about, the 11 personnel usage there, because like that's something you would like to know when you turn around and he's playing less than like 30% of snaps a week from now. So the matchup, as good as it is like it is still Lamar Jackson, right? Like Dante Fowler got him twice last week. I think I want to say Washington had more than 2 sacks there. So you never know, because he's looking to extend plays. He's playing at a really, really confident level, almost like more than he has in some of those MVP seasons. That offense is definitely like starting to be way more tailor fit towards him, and he's trending towards a third MVP season at this point. A guy I like in those DT premium leagues is Logan Hall's been a sleeper. Obviously we know what Vita Vea has been able to do. He's been very solid, but Logan Hall's been a guy that's been kind of hanging around there, putting some stats together there. Again, very tough matchup on paper against the offensive line. If the game kind of plays out like I expect it to, with Tampa chasing for a good amount of the game, I could see a lot of rotation, and I'm 100% with you on Diaby. Like you watch him on film and you're like, oh man, he just missed a sack, and then you're going to look at some of the stats and you're like, man, it's just not there yet, right? Like, but the metrics and winning as much as he is and getting back there, it's really just converting him. So the success rate, if the opportunities are there, you got to think the success is going to be there eventually.
Mhm.
So, and then obviously to close it out there, Antoine Winfield made us wait, what, 5.5 weeks,
Yeah.
6 weeks, somewhere in there, and then comes back and scoops up a fumble for a touchdown and rewards his
Yeah.
you know, and Tampa Bay really put the screws to us by not even sending them to IR, so we couldn't get that extra roster spot. So, but nice to have him back. Obviously, we'll be interested with the dynamic between him, Jordan Whitehead, and Tyke Smith playing out of the slot a lot. So, I think with usage, depending on the matchup, to your point, is really just going to be those guys are all going to be on the field pending the matchup. They're not going to have too many Baltimore, I think, on their schedule. So I think
Right.
there's going to be better days for Tyke Smith, to your point.
Yeah, for sure. And then, the other thing too with these safeties, like I do wonder if Christian Izien comes back, who did a nice job filling in for Winfield when he was
Yeah.
out. Like with them not having that second or I guess third linebacker to play on those passing downs, like and I know that they obviously don't feel like they want to trust KJ Britt on those passing downs. Like I do wonder if we start to see maybe more three safety looks. Maybe that does become Tyke Smith on passing downs, right? If Christian Izien isn't that guy, but it's hard to believe that they want to keep KJ Britt out there in a 100% snap role, considering how they treated him earlier in the season before the Servassier Dennis injury,
Yep.
and just based on his play, right? So that's just something to kind of watch here going forward. But yeah, Levante David, other than that, I mean, he's LB7 for me this week, like him quite a bit, and Antoine Winfield safety 1. So let's go to the second Monday Night Football game, last game of the week. Los Angeles Chargers at the Arizona Cardinals. Where would you like to start with these two?
Joey Bosa is the worst.
Yes.
So he played 2 games this season. I think I sent out a tweet like, "Wow, stay 8-0," and then he's like,
I
"Yeah, I'm
know.
just not going to play for the until you tweet again." So, I don't know, like rostering Joey Bosa at this point, like unless you have Tuli Tuiapo, like it's just really probably not, like it's just frustrating, and in a Monday night scenario is probably the worst
Yeah.
scenario. So yeah, I mean it's just it's not good.
No.
And moving on to the linebackers there, six most tackles per game allowed there for Arizona. Perryman and Henley really close in fantasy points per game. Perryman 34, Henley 36. We'd like to see Henley boom there because Denzel Perryman, we know what we get there. So Alohi Gilman, I think, has been another guy that's kind of played a little bit better. And then Elijah Molden, I knew it was like kind of like a 1 week experiment when Derwin
Mhm.
got the kind of BS suspension there. But it seems like he's kind of being his usage. I'd be interested to know his usage if you have it, because it seems like it's he had another good week there even with Derwin back. So it's kind of interesting. Obviously he came into the league as like a cornerback safety hybrid. Played mostly cornerback, I think like slottish with Tennessee. And then, obviously like really didn't even know he was on the Chargers until like early in the season when I kind of saw him on a preseason roster. So, yeah, I mean, obviously Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, you know what you're getting there when Bosa is playing. But, the fact that he's kind of, I just feel like he's probably going to have a questionable tag from now until he retires.
It's pretty likely, right? Yeah, like you said, it's just not worth trusting him just because, like, again, it's Monday Night Football. Like, we don't know. Even if he does play, he's probably going to play like,
Yeah.
15 to 20 snaps at the very most, right? So it's just, again, you don't need to put Joey Bosa in your lineups until we see it from him again. As far as Elijah Molden goes, usage last week was 70% snap share, while Alohi Gilman and Derwin played 100%, right? So this had a lot to do with how this team deployed their linebackers to last week, where with Junior Colson back in the lineup, they
Yep.
didn't have a full-time guy. So they all just kind of rotated like crazy. Diane Henley played the most at 77%, but like 57% for Junior Colson, 39% for Denzel Perriman. There wasn't really room for a second linebacker there for the most part. So it allowed for that third safety to get onto the field quite a bit in Elijah Moulton. So we'll see. I mean, if they're going to continue to do that. This was only the first game back with Junior
Yep.
Colson, so at the very least, like it has me at least down on the linebacker core
Yep.
again, just because the snaps aren't consistent enough, and then maybe we get some deep league usage out of Elijah Moulton there, but. How about on the Arizona side of things here to wrap it up? I know Kaiser White dealing with a potential knee injury. We don't know if he's going to play or not, but feels unlikely at this point. So, how are you feeling about Mac Wilson and Chris Barnes?
Yeah, Chris Barnes was the kind of the feature player in the injuries to monitor this week, obviously, because Kaiser is going to be touch and go. A tough scenario, right? Because of being Monday Night Football, I
Yep.
think most of those guys that are going after Chris Barnes are probably guys who have Kaiser White. If they were smart, right? Like be able to kind of at least hedge your bet there going into that Monday night game. But Arizona linebackers have been producing. It's not a terrible matchup, but it's not a great matchup. So, but yeah, I mean, outside of that and that Arizona defense, you know what you're getting from Jalen Thompson and Budda Baker. It's been kind of dynamic up front. Zaven Collins has had some boom weeks. Gardecki's been back in there, but it's not anything that I'm, trusting with a lot of faith there. And there isn't much on that Arizona defense outside of the linebackers that I'm, interested in. Obviously,
Yeah.
Budda Baker, I know I'm never going to take out of my lineup. So
Yeah, Budda Baker's been incredible this season. So yeah, hopefully he just keeps it going because the rest of the group. I mean, Mac Wilson is a safe start either way. Like if Kaiser White plays, like I think Mac Wilson, his snap share has been kind of fluctuating too. But I think this is the kind of matchup where even if Kaiser White is in there playing 100% of snaps, Mac
yeah,
Wilson should see a decent snap share because it's the Chargers who are the most run heavy offense in the NFL. So they'll want their linebackers out there at a pretty high rate. But yeah, if you're a Kaiser White manager, I mean, just make sure you have Chris Barnes if you're
yeah,
relying on him. That way you can make that swap. Chris Barnes probably not going to play a full-time role, but like I said, it's a run-heavy offense that they're facing, so it'll be better than most weeks
yeah.
basically for him. So yeah, we'll have to kind of see how that shakes out. But yeah, I'm with you. Arizona, just there's not a lot of interesting pieces there to trust.
Greg Roman hates the forward pass.
He he really does, man. He really, really does. Um, but yeah, it's helped J.K. Dobbins so far.
Yeah,
So
yeah, for sure.
get some use there.
Has
But
not helped any Justin Herbert
no,
chairs.
not at all. That's been God. But yeah, that is gonna do it for us. Thank you guys all so much for tuning in, watching, liking, subscribing, all the stuff that I very much appreciate that you guys continue to do. It helps me a ton. So thank you guys. And again, hopefully, all that information helps you win your matchups this week. I know, we cover a ton. We can't cover every single thing. So if you do still have questions, always feel free to ask them in the comment section here on YouTube or reach out via Twitter. I always do my best to get to them all, and John will do the same if you reach out to him, I'm sure. So, John, massive thank you to you for helping me break down this slate of games for 2 hours here and helping to get the good folks ready for week 7. So I always enjoy doing these shows with you. I can't thank you enough for giving me so much of your time tonight.
Anytime. Appreciate being on. You do the best, I mean, for this community, all the work that you're putting out on a weekly basis, the tackle charts, everything from someone playing in their first IDP league to someone looking to, potentially win some money over there on DraftKings. You provide all that data. So very, very appreciated, my friend.
Oh man, no, I appreciate it, man. It means a lot, and I feel the same way about you doing excellent work over there at Dynasty Nerds. So, please let everybody know what you got going on over at Dynasty Nerds this season.
So our weekly IDP fantasy players that you need to add comes out every Tuesday, and then our IDP recommended start sits will be out every Friday afternoon. So make sure you check that out. Things are doing really well over there on the IDP front. Obviously, kind of solo manning that, but the feedback has been really good. And it's really just at the end of the day something I love to do. So have a lot of IDP stuff kind of stuck in the brain there, so being able to get it out and get it on some paper for people to read and kind of get a little bit of glimpse of what goes on is kind of nice. So I appreciate all the support and obviously being a part of this community. So
Absolutely, man. You do great work over there. So I'm glad to see that, the feedback and everything is going so well because, yeah, you deserve it. So make sure to check out John's work over at Dynasty Nerds. And then as for me, IDP Fantasy Report, that's out now. It'll be linked in the episode description that lists all the waiver wire targets, snap shares, utilization nuggets, and plenty of my thoughts and notes for every single team. IDP rankings article, again, I'll also link that in the episode description, as well as the link to the new rankings page as well, to hopefully help sort those start sit questions. But again, feel free to drop questions in the comments if you have them. And then, yeah, I mean, I'll be back on what'll be Monday morning for the week 7 IDP recap video. Be sure to check that out as well. Again, appreciate you all. Good luck this week. And until next time, peace out.